What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you 5 games that I 100% but didn't actually review for one reason or another. Now, sometimes that is because I 100% these games a long time ago and reviewing them now just doesn't really make any sense. Other times it's because the games themselves are so small that they're just a small, fun experience and don't really have much to add to like a video in terms of what they're about beyond like a couple of sentences. And then still, other times I do like a checkout video or something and I want to keep playing it, but once I finish it, like there's just not much to add beyond that initial video. And so taking the time to drop a full review doesn't necessarily always make sense in those cases either. But for whatever reason, here's a few games that I went through the effort of doing all that work for only to not actually review them. Starting first and foremost with Betrayal at Club Low, a game that released in late 2022. Betrayal at Club Low, I think, is best described as a bizarre fever dream of a game. It's not very long at all, like a single playthrough is probably only going to be like an hour or two, and the full 100% only took me like 7 hours. But Betrayal at Club Low is all about you trying to rescue one of your operatives from a nightclub that just so happens to have been a coffin factory at one point. We are taking on the role of a pizza delivery man as an undercover opportunity to get into the club and do what we need to do. And this turns into using pizza dice to make up a bunch of different roles as you try to get in or out of any given situation, leading to one of the game's many endings. And I think the best way to really think about Betrayal at Club Low is like a one-shot tabletop experience, because it is just such a bizarre time. So while I didn't wind up reviewing this one, I absolutely recommend it. There's even a demo over on Steam if you want to try it out before you buy it. But if you find yourself with a few hours to kill and like $10, Betrayal at Club Low is definitely worth the effort in my opinion. Now, much more recently, a game I played in October but didn't really cover at all was the release of it's effectively like a visual novel for Vampire the Masquerade, Reckoning of New York. For those who don't know, Vampire the Masquerade releases a lot of like visual novel games over on Steam, and a couple of them actually got some pretty high praise. That is Coteries of New York, followed up by Shadows of New York, and then most recently, Reckoning of New York. They all tell like a continuing line of stories about the same vampires in New York and some of the things they're dealing with. Now, honestly, these games play like a sort of choose-your-own adventure book in a lot of cases, and I really love them. I could also see people arguing that, honestly, they might not even really be games in the traditional sense. It's more of just like reading a book, but as a video game. And that's pretty much why I didn't review it. I would have a hard time really offering much to say about it outside of just, showing you what the game is. Because how much you like Vampire the Masquerade, and thus the writing of this, I would say, is really going to make up the bulk of your opinion on the matter because of the kinds of games they are. Now, not for nothing, but Shadows of New York was actually my favorite one, with Reckoning of New York not exactly being as good as the previous 2 entries, at least as far as I'm concerned. But one thing I do like about it is that it gives you an opportunity to see the world through specific vampire clans that don't necessarily get a lot of representation otherwise. For instance, in Shadows, you can play as a La Sombra, and I enjoy them for what they are. But moving right along, for our 3rd entry, we then have Sable, another game I played all the way back in, I believe it was 2022 as well, towards the end of it. Sable is a coming-of-age exploration title that really doesn't have anything like traditional combat or whatnot. It's just a lot of exploration and solving puzzles and everything as you seek to complete a bunch of objectives to earn masks. Because in this world, people undergo what they call a gliding, a rite of passage where basically you travel the area, learning about what people do, why they do the things they do, and if you help them out, they'll give you masks. And when you turn these masks in, you basically earn the right to choose that as your profession for the rest of your life. But in addition to all that, it's also just a really unique world with a lot of fun mechanics and exploration to be had as you kind of learn about whatever was here beforehand and how people are trying to get through things now. And as a result, I enjoyed it. The publisher, Raw Fury, has put out a lot of interesting indie titles over the years, but Sable remains one of my favorites, even if it's not the kind of thing I would normally play, which is kind kind of why I didn't review it. Every once in a while I'll play something that's a little outside of my wheelhouse that I'll really love, but when it comes to reviewing it, like I'm not even sure where to begin in terms of what to say. And while I would feel a little better about reviewing this one now, at the time I just wasn't really sure how to approach it, which is why I didn't. Fourth up, we then have Ereban, Shadow Legacy, a relatively recent title that released back in April, I believe. This one is technically indie, I think, but it feels a little more AA in its execution, where we play as the very last member of a long-forgotten race, and we're going to use our character's shadow powers in order to evade capture, while also trying to take down some corporate overlords in a bid to learn more about us and who we are and why we're here and why everyone is so intent on killing us for being the last member of this race. And on top of that, the rest of it just so happens to be a bit of like a stealth platformer, which is a lot of fun, especially because it plays around with shadow and light in addition to more traditional, I would say, stealth elements, because our character, wielding a bunch of shadow powers, is able to like traverse shadows outside of just like the more standard, view distance and range and everything, which is also there. But being able to play around with those shadows specifically was a ton of fun. And that's to say nothing of things like high-tech gadgets and everything you'll get to mess around with in this world, and even make some decisions along the way. Overall, I would say Ereban is a game that is much better than its initial reception might have led you to believe, but the people who have played it seem to have really enjoyed it, myself included. Now, I'll be honest, the reason I didn't cover this one is just because there wasn't a lot of interest from the audience. I did put out like a checkout video for it, I'm pretty sure, and the interest seemed to be pretty low. But I did enjoy playing it for myself, and I had a lot of fun doing so. Which brings us to our final entry, which is Beyond Galaxyland. This one is relatively recent, releasing back in September, only like a month or so ago, and I did do a sponsored spot for this one back then, which is also true of Sable, I'm pretty sure, but that one is much older. But the reason I didn't decide to go ahead and review it fully on my own is mostly that because everything I talked about in the sponsored video was kind of just everything there was to the game, and outside of just, a proper recommendation, it really wouldn't have changed much. So for what it's worth, here it is. I think Beyond Galaxyland is great. It's also only like $10. But the gist of it is that it is a throwback adventure RPG inspired by all sorts of stuff, really, but mostly sci-fi movies, and we take a teenager who just so happens to witness the end of Earth only before being more or less abducted and thrown into a strange new galaxy that he has to find a way to navigate, while also getting to the bottom of why people wanted to save bits of humanity to bring them to Galaxyland as opposed to just letting them all be wiped out by this apocalyptic plague affecting everything outside of Galaxyland, and why this company that supposedly saved you also won't let humans basically have any sort of technology, etc. So there's a lot of mysteries to be uncovered there, alongside some solid turn-based combat that livens things up as well. So all in all, I thought Beyond Galaxyland was a really cool game, but again, once I had initially made that first video, I was like, I really don't have anything else to say about this, because it's not really a big game at all. I think it only took me like 15 hours to 100% it. But I think even some of what they did with like questing in this one is a lot of fun, with there being like a murder mystery as well as other more investigative things that see you getting to the bottom of individual crises on different planets, and even of course a bunch of optional content around like capturing creatures to use as summons in your turn-based battles as an example. So as you might imagine, I thought it was a great time. But there's been a whole bunch of games that for one reason or another I 100%, even if I didn't get around to actually reviewing them. So with any luck, you enjoyed that video, as I was hoping to shine a light on some cool games that I just haven't been able to cover otherwise this year. But if you've enjoyed them or any of them look interesting to you, I'd love to hear about it down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.